MS-06 Zaku II head unit. At the center of the Zaku II's head unit sits a main camera, and the face of the machine carries the ubiquitous mono eye that defines the silhouette. Secondary external cameras ring the head as well, giving the pilot peripheral awareness of the field around him. On the MS-06S commander type, a multi-blade antenna rises from the head to mark it as a commander's machine, broadcasting authority before the unit ever fires a shot. What the head does not do is house the pilot. The cockpit sits in the torso, completely separate from the head unit, leaving the Zaku II's most visible feature doing exactly one job: seeing. That decision makes more sense when you look at the broader unit. The MS-06 Zaku II carries the official designation Mass Production General Purpose Mobile Suit of the Principality of Zeon, and every part of the design reflects that classification. Development of the MS-06 Zaku II began in September of Universal Century 0078, with first units rolling out for combat deployment in March of Universal Century 0079. The original head design was drafted by series director Yoshiyuki Tomino, then refined by mechanical designer Kunio Okawara for production. The machine first appeared in Episode 1 of Mobile Suit Gundam under the title Gundam Rising, and it needed to fight in large numbers almost immediately. Building the cockpit into the head would have made every single Zaku II more complex, more expensive, and harder to replace when one was lost. Instead, the head became a self-contained sensor pod that could be swapped or serviced without touching the pilot compartment in the torso. And here's where it gets strange. Because the cockpit sits lower in the body, the pilot's primary view comes through a system of secondary cameras mounted externally on the head, not from looking out through the mono eye the way a human pilot might expect. The mono eye is a camera lens, not a visor. The pilot is effectively flying blind inside the torso, relying entirely on data fed through that head unit from a distance. The thing everyone pictures as the Zaku's face is, structurally speaking, a remote-controlled turret that happens to sit right above the pilot's head. The design reason for all of this is who the Zaku II was built for. Not an ace, not a specialist, but the many. Kunio Okawara refined Tomino's draft into something that could be mass-produced, repaired in the field, and operated by any pilot the Principality could field. The mono-eye sensor package in the head, the secondary external cameras, the commander's antenna on the S-type, every one of those choices prioritizes manufacturing simplicity and operational flexibility over the pilot's direct line of sight. The head is a plug-and-play vision system, not a cockpit, because the Zaku II was built to be built and built to be lost in enormous numbers. RX-78 GP02A Physalis head unit. The Zaku II head unit was built for the many, a mass-production sensor package mounted above a torso cockpit for thousands of standard Zeon pilots. The Physalis was built for the one. Where the Zaku II stripped everything down to make production fast and cheap, this head unit is part of a custom mobile suit designed around a single purpose: unleashing a tactical nuclear warhead. The RX-78 GP02A Physalis was deployed in UC-083, and the moment it left the dock, its design priorities were already completely different from anything that had come before. Original mechanical designer Shoji Kawamori built a machine with no mass production in mind, no standardized parts, no concern for cost or replacement rate. It was built to deliver one specific payload, and everything in its head, everything in its whole body, served that warhead. The defining weapon is the large atomic bazooka the Physalis carries, capable of launching a Mark 82 strategic nuclear warhead. That choice cascades through the entire head design. The unit carried an oversized shield to help it survive the conditions of its own weapon's blast, and it was still equipped with beam sabers and Vulcan cannons for close combat once the strategic shot was fired. Anna Volgado made the RX-78 GP02A famous during Operation Stardust when he used it to inflict devastating damage on Federation forces at the Konpeito asteroid base with a single warhead, then escaped through the unit's rear hatch. The head that had directed that strike was attached to the machine that had just leveled a fleet, and when Gado left through the rear, he left behind a head unit that had successfully done exactly what it was built to do, once. Remnant Zeon forces stole the RX-78 GP02A Physalis following its deployment, which means the machine never operated under the conditions for which it was designed. It was built as a nuclear weapon for a standing army and immediately handed to an underground faction flying raider missions. The head unit carried a pilot through a theft and infiltration and a one-sided bombardment all while the machine it sat atop was never supposed to exist outside Federation control. The warhead did its job. The head did its job. And then Gato walked out the back. Subscribe and tell us in the comments which mobile suit head unit you think was the most fitting for its machine. Let's get back into it. MSN-02 Zeong head unit. The Physalis was built around a nuclear warhead for one pilot to fire once. The MSN-02 Zeong is built around a pilot who can think like a weapon, and its head unit is something no previous design had even attempted. The cockpit itself capable of detaching as a fully independent combat escape unit. The head contained the main cockpit and could operate as its own machine the moment it separated from the mobile armor's torso, something the Zaku II's head could never do, something the Physalis head was never asked to do. The head unit housed the Zeong's main cockpit, and a single Newtype pilot could command the entire mobile suit from that position. A single Newtype pilot could operate the entire mobile suit from the head cockpit, though system startup required the torso position first. A standard pilot and gunner team could split between the two cockpits instead, with the head gunner handling the Zeong's primary weapons while the torso pilot managed movement. Once detached, the head unit could operate independently with its weapons still functional on stored power. When propellant and energy ran low, redocking with the main body replenished both. The head unit's detachable design proved decisive in the Zeong's final battle at Abawa Q. Every system in that head, the dual cockpit, the independent propellant, the self-sustained mega-particle gun, was built so that a Newtype ace could abandon the machine but keep fighting, even after the body was gone. And that leaves the question nobody has answered. The Zaku II head was built for volume. The Physalis head was built for a single decisive shot. The Zeong head was built to let its pilot out of a dying machine and keep killing. Each one tells you something about who was supposed to use it and what they were supposed to survive. But what the Zeong's design ultimately establishes is that the head unit mattered more than the body it sat on, not as a sensor package, not as a weapon mount, but as the cockpit, the escape pod, and the last weapon standing all in one. GF-13-17 NJII God Gundam head unit. Where the Zeong's detachable head cockpit made the head a self-contained escape pod, the God Gundam's head unit collapses the boundary between the pilot and the machine entirely, and it does it at a scale that affects every fight in the tournament it enters. Neo Japan completed this unit in Future Century 60 as the successor to the GF-13-017 NJ Shining Gundam, upgrading a prototype combat mobile suit specifically for the Gundam fight. The production model number carries that lineage forward. GF-13-017 NGII is the same base number as the Shining Gundam, just with the Roman numeral 2 marking the iteration. In the English dub, the entire machine was renamed Burning Gundam, though the codename on Neo Japan's own documentation remained God Gundam throughout. Domon Kashu is the pilot, and his head unit contains the cockpit that houses the mobile trace system, the interface that reads his body's motion and maps it directly onto the suit's combat output. The Batwing V-fin on the head unit doesn't just sit there, it's the visual anchor of an entire fighting philosophy, and it glows when the system activates. The mobile trace system is the detail that changes everything about what a head unit can do. Rather than conventional controls, the pilot inside that head cockpit moves physically, and the Gundam mirrors those movements in real time. A punch Domon throws with his own arm translates directly into the suit's arm. The head unit isn't just where he sits, it's where the translation happens, making it the single most critical component in the entire mobile suit. If the head unit is compromised, the pilot loses not just visibility and command, but the very mechanism that makes the machine fight at all. The escalation from Future Century 60 onward makes this dangerous in a way the Zeong never was. The Gundam fight is a televised tournament, and every nation is watching. And before you dismiss the head unit as just a cockpit with good branding, consider what happens when the English dub renamed the God Gundam to Burning Gundam. That renaming cascades through every downstream reference, wikis, trading cards, fan discussions, to the point where viewers encountering the series for the first time through that dub never learn the machine's actual designation. The Batwing V-fin is still there on the head unit, still doing the same work, but now it belongs to a Gundam with a different name entirely. ZGMF-X-79A Justice Gundam Head Unit. If the God Gundam's head unit was complicated, the Justice Gundam's head unit is a deliberate contradiction built into the design itself. The Justice and Freedom Gundams share internal architecture, the same core systems, the same cockpit specifications, the same reactor output, and the same mechanical designer, Kunio Okawara, built both machines at ZAFT's request. But the head unit of the Justice tells a completely different story from the Freedoms. Two suits from the same design lineage, same factory, same era, yet their head units don't look like variations on a theme so much as statements of opposing intent. The Justice stands 18.6 meters tall, and that head unit sits at the top of an 18-meter argument about what a ZAFT flagship is supposed to represent. The internal similarity between the Justice and Freedom Gundams is the detail that makes the head unit divergence feel like a provocation. If the engineers had full freedom to design the Justice independently, why build it around the same internal layout as the Freedom and then give it a head unit that reads as the Freedom's structural opposite? The model number ZGMF-X09A marks it as one of the advanced Gundam type units fielded by ZAFT in Cosmic Era 71, and Athrin Zala is the pilot who steps into that head cockpit. The head unit becomes, in effect, the visual manifesto of a machine that shares its guts with its supposed counterpart, but wears its purpose on its face like something incompatible with it. The Justice Gundam's head unit lands on a simple fact that the evidence forces. The divergence between the Justice and the Freedom is not accidental. Two ZAFT Gundams with identical internals and diametrically opposed head units, built by the same designer in the same program, piloted by two men whose relationship to the war they're fighting is itself a contradiction. The head units don't resolve that tension, they embody it permanently in silhouette. ASWG-01 Gundam Bael. Head unit. If the Justice Gundam's head unit broke the expected design pattern, the Gundam Bael's head unit reveals that the pattern was never there to begin with. 18.5 meters tall, 28.2 tons empty. Two electromagnetic cannons built into the thruster wings, two swords, and nothing else in its standard armament configuration. The cockpit is located in the torso, not the head, and uses an Alea Vidnana compatible system that lets the pilot interface directly with the Mobile Suit Gundam nervous system. Standard AHAB wave environment sensors, and on the console, upon activation, an image matching the sigil of Bael, a mark of identification tied to the unit's original pilot. 300 years. That's how long the unit sat in Gjallarhorn's headquarters Vingolf before McGillis Farid reactivated it, and in those 3 centuries the design language of mobile suits evolved completely. The Bael's head unit has no cannon, no beam saber mount, no secondary weapon system of any kind. Compared to every Gundam frame that followed it, the Bael is a relatively standard unit with few special features. And that standardization is the most radical thing about it. The head unit is armor plate and a V-fin shaped like bat wings, carrying the Bael sigil on activation, and that's all. Every offensive capability lives in the torso-mounted systems and the thruster wing cannons. The head unit's job is simply to be there, to sit atop a machine whose real interface is elsewhere entirely. The Alea Vijnana system in the torso cockpit means the pilot doesn't even need to look through the head unit's optics to command the suit. The single sentence a viewer would repeat to a friend tomorrow: the Gundam Bael's head unit is the only Gundam helmet in the entire franchise whose primary purpose is to show you whose side it's on. RGM-79 GM head unit, where the Gundam Bael stripped its head down to nothing and called it a design choice, the GM takes the opposite failure mode. It borrowed everything it had and somehow made that more offensive. The basic structure of the RGM-79 GM's head was derived from the RX-78 Gundam's design, with the GM ground type preceding it as a pre-production variant using Operation V spare parts, making it the iconic face of the Earth Federation Force's entire mass production line. The RGM-79 GM head unit was significantly simplified based on the RX-78 Gundam's head unit, stripping away the original's complex sensor assemblies and command fittings in favor of something that could be stamped out by the thousands. The simplification actually created internal space the Gundam never had, allowing increased Vulcan cannon ammunition capacity that the RX-78 couldn't accommodate because every cubic centimeter of its head was already allocated to something else. The camera eye was changed to the visor type adopted for the highly productive RX-77 gun cannon. A deliberate design lineage choice that signaled this was a Gundam successor in every way that mattered to the factory floor. Here's where it gets worse. The GM head wasn't just easier to build than the Gundams. It was better at its actual job, more ammunition, a camera system already proven on a mass production line, a shape that didn't require hand fitting during assembly. Every metric the Federation actually cared about, the GM head unit won, and it won specifically because it wasn't trying to be a Gundam. And that is the small version of the problem. The GM's head unit became the standard not because it was the best design anyone could dream up, but because the entire Earth Federation Forces mobile suit program was built around a single question: how many of these can we field before the war ends? The GM head unit is the answer to that question, rendered in metal and glass, and it's been the face of Federation mass production mobile suits ever since. And before you call this a downgrade, let's be precise about what the GM head unit actually sacrificed. The Gundam's V-fin, that distinctive vertical antenna array, wasn't purely decorative. It housed the RX-78-2's primary long-range communication and sensor array, and losing it meant the GM traded battlefield awareness for production efficiency. The visor camera eye that replaced it was borrowed from the gun cannon, which was itself a compromised machine, meaning the GM's head unit was built from second-generation parts from the moment it left the drawing board. The camera eye was changed to the visor type adopted for the highly productive RX-77 gun cannon, a machine that had already proven it could be manufactured in volume. The GM head unit wasn't designed to match the Gundam's capabilities, it was designed to replace them. What's actually happening here is a military doctrine getting encoded into a single piece of hardware. The Federation didn't set out to build a cheap knockoff of the RX-78, they set out to build a mobile suit that any trained pilot could operate, that any factory could produce, that any supply depot could maintain. The GM head unit is the physical proof that they understood the assignment. Every simplification was a decision. Every removed sensor was a calculation. The V-fin went away not because the designers forgot it, but because the Gundam's radar array required specialized maintenance that a mass production army couldn't support across 100 frontline theaters. The GM head unit's visor-type camera eye works on every GM, everywhere, without a specialist technician standing next to it. That's not a downgrade, that's a different design target entirely. And the GM hit it harder than anything Zeon ever fielded, RX-78-2 Gundam head unit. The GM head unit was built from proven mass production ready parts. The RX-78-2 Gundam was designed by Kunio Okawara as something that had never existed before. And that distinction is doing a lot of work. As a machine so technically advanced that the Federation didn't even have a maintenance protocol for it. The head unit was armed with 60mm Vulcan guns X2, a specific caliber, a specific mounting, a specific ammunition type that mattered when you had exactly 12 rounds per gun, and everything on the battlefield could survive a 60mm hit without slowing down. The Gundam's head unit housed the RX-78-2's sophisticated sensor suite and communication array, packed into a compact frame that had to function as a weapons mount, a sensor platform, and a cockpit pressure seal simultaneously. The V-fin, that unmistakable vertical antenna blade rising from the RX-78-2's forehead, wasn't decorative. It housed the Gundam's primary long-range communication array and supplemental sensor package, giving it battlefield awareness capabilities no Federation mass production suit could match. The head unit's camera eye was a single exposed optical sensor, not a visor, meaning a single well-placed shot could permanently blind the machine. The RX-78-2's head unit was built as a custom prototype for a custom pilot, optimized for performance in every dimension except the one the GM was built for, producibility. The 60mm Vulcan guns X2 were mounted directly to the head unit itself, a configuration that made the Gundam's upper body heavier and more complex than anything the GM would ever carry, and that complexity was never going to scale. The Gundam's head unit wasn't just a more expensive version of what came after, it was designed by different rules for a different problem. Kunio Okawara's original design for the RX-78-2 had to serve as the prototype for a new weapon system that didn't exist yet, with no production line, no supply chain, no maintenance manual, and no pilot training pipeline. The GM head unit, by contrast, was designed for a machine that was already being built before the designer finished drawing it. That's not a criticism of either approach, it's an explanation for why the GM's visor-type camera, eye, and the Gundam's exposed single-lens sensor represent two entirely different answers to the question of what a mobile suit head unit is supposed to do. The RX-78 Gundam first appeared in Mobile Suit Gundam episode number 01, Gundam Rising, as a machine so far ahead of everything else on the battlefield that the war's outcome was effectively decided the moment its cockpit hatch opened. The head unit, with its V-fin, its exposed sensor, its dual 60mm Vulcans, its single-purpose custom design, is the physical reason why. MS-06 Zaku II head unit. The standard MS-06 Zaku II head unit is one of the most recognizable silhouettes in the entire franchise, a flat-faced, mono-eyed helmet with a forward-sweeping crest and two curved ventilation units on the sides. The MS-06 is not that machine. The MS-06 head unit features a multi-blade antenna that marks it as a commander's machine, replacing the standard Zaku II's single forward crest with an arrangement of four sharp, upward extending spikes that transform the entire head silhouette. The overall width of the MS-06 is 9.2 minutes, or 9.7 minutes. When including the head spikes, those spikes add half a meter to the machine's overall width, a measurement that matters when you're threading through urban combat corridors designed for standard Zaku frames. The MS-06 is customized at Char request based on the standard MS-06 Zaku II, which means every deviation from the standard head unit design is a deliberate choice made for a specific pilot-specific combat style. The MS-06 has its thruster unit limiters removed to enable higher mobility, and that increased performance comes with increased pilot demand. The MS-06 demands far more piloting skill than the standard Zaku II type, because the machine is now operating beyond the safety margins built into the base model. The MS-06 specializes in hit-and-you-run tactics using its high thrust, a combat doctrine that depends on the commander getting in fast, getting out faster, and never letting the enemy dictate the range. The Zaku II first appeared in Mobile Suit Gundam episode number 01, Gundam Rising, and the Zaku II was redesigned by Kunio Okawara based on an earlier draft by series director Yoshiyuki Tomino, meaning the head silhouette that would become the franchise's most iconic enemy face went through multiple iterations before Zeon ever fielded one. The MS-06 Zaku II commander type is not a Zaku II at all. It's a different machine wearing the same name. The multi-blade antenna that defines the S-type head unit is not an aesthetic upgrade to the standard Zaku II's single crest. It's a different antenna system entirely, serving a different tactical function mounted on a head unit with a different internal layout to support it. The MS-06 is Char Aznabul's personal Zaku II, painted in his distinctive red colors, customized to his specifications, and the fact that Zeon's military-industrial complex allowed a single pilot to commission a fundamentally different head unit design says something about how that military valued its aces. The overall width of the MS-06 is 9.2 mm, or 9.7 mm, when including the head spikes, and those spikes aren't just for recognition, they're a signal to everyone on the battlefield about exactly what they're facing. The MS-06 commander type is usually grouped with the standard Zaku II as if the difference were cosmetic. The multi-blade antenna, the modified head unit internals, the red paint scheme, the removed thruster limiters, the combat doctrine built entirely around one pilot's ability to read a battlefield faster than his opponents, these aren't variations on a theme. They're a different animal, and Zeon built an entire military philosophy around fielding them. The MS-06 head unit's most important feature isn't the antenna count or the color scheme. It's what the head unit signals to the pilot sitting inside it. This machine was built for someone who doesn't need the safety net the standard Zaku provides. MSN-04 Sazabi head unit. The MS-06 established what a Zeon commander's machine could look like with its multi-blade antenna. The Sazabi takes that lineage and runs it through a completely different set of engineering constraints. The head unit carries a mono-eye sensor as part of its Zeon-type design paired with antennae that incorporate a clear forehead gem set directly into the antennae piece itself. A hinge running through the head allows the entire unit to split into parts. The numbers are exact. The mobile suit stands 2560 meters tall overall, with a total height of 25.6 meters. Anaheim Electronics manufactured this in UC0093 for Neo Zeon under the designation MSN-04, and the head unit incorporates a cockpit escape pod system. Char Aznabul commissioned the Sazabi's development as a successor to the MSN-03, with enhanced propulsion output and mobility as explicit requirements. That hinge splitting the head apart is doing something very specific. It's an access point for the cockpit buried inside. A mono-eye sensor, antennae, a clear forehead gem, none of that explains a split head unless there's a spherical cockpit in there needing entry. The Sazabi isn't an evolution of Zeon head design, it's Anaheim Electronics building a new type use mobile suit around an all-round spherical cockpit and dressing the head in Zeon visual language. So the engineering underneath didn't look like a complete departure from what came before. The real innovation was never the mono-eye, it was that Anaheim figured out how to put a full spherical cockpit inside a 23-meter head unit and still make the whole thing work as a combat platform. RX-73 New Gundam Head Unit. If the Sazabi proved that Newtype specific engineering could produce a functional combat mobile suit, the New Gundam's head unit shows what happens when that philosophy gets handed to engineers who weren't interested in preserving Zeon design conventions. Where the Sazabi kept the mono-eye and retained the cockpit as a physical space within its spherical housing, the New Gundam abandons both entirely. The only feature distinguishing its head unit from standard Gundam type units is a triple face vent instead of the standard double. That's it. The cockpit isn't in the head, it's an ejectable panoramic monitor and linear seat cockpit located in the torso, which means the entire head unit above the neck has no command function whatsoever. It is a sensor cluster and antenna array shaped like a Gundam face and nothing more. But the actual departure runs deeper than the head. The cockpit incorporates the PsychoMu system to enable funnel control through the pilot's brainwaves. The suit's responsiveness is limited only by the pilot's neural processing speed. The New Gundam doesn't have a cockpit the pilot sits inside, it has an interface that dissolves the boundary between the pilot's nervous system and the mobile suit's control systems entirely. Where the Sazabi kept a spherical cockpit as a discrete physical space, the New Gundam replaces the cockpit with microscopic PsychoMu receptors distributed throughout the torso unit. The head's triple face vent is the only Gundam type marker left on the entire design. Everything else has been rebuilt around the principle that the suit should respond to thought before the pilot consciously decides to act. MS-06 Nightingale Head Unit. The Sazabi still had some relationship to the Zeon visual language it inherited. The Nightingale abandons that lineage completely, and the overall silhouette makes no attempt to look like anything resembling a standard mobile suit. The binders overhang both shoulders, a large rear armor piece extends far backward past the backpack, and the front armor is as substantial as the legs themselves. The armor uses thick Gundurium alloy, which provides superior protection while staying relatively lightweight compared to conventional materials. Power comes from a Minovsky-type ultra-compact fusion reactor rated at 6,760 kilowatts. Significantly more than standard mobile suits of the era carry. Psycho frame technology runs throughout the Nightingale's structure, giving it responsiveness to a Newtype pilot's mental commands that goes beyond what mechanical controls can achieve. That responsiveness feeds directly into the advanced PsychoMu system, which enables precise control of the Nightingale's numerous funnel weapons. The MSN in the model code marks it as a Newtype use machine, the 04 places it as the fourth design in that line, and the PU suffix identifies it as a variant of the MSN-04 Sazabi. Anaheim Electronics developed the Nightingale as an alternative to the Sazabi, which means the silhouette was a deliberate choice, not an accident of heavy armament. The Sazabi's Zeon styling and its spherical cockpit suggested a machine still recognizable as a successor to earlier designs. The Nightingale is Anaheim's answer to what happens when you remove that constraint entirely and build exclusively around the Psycho frame and PsychoMu systems. The overhanging binders, the massive rear armor, the front plate as large as the legs, none of that serves a conventional pilot's ergonomics. Every deviation from humanoid proportions exists to house more reactor output, more Psycho frame mass, more funnel capacity. The Nightingale isn't a mobile suit designed to carry a Newtype pilot. It's a weapon system built around a Newtype's consciousness, and the armor shape is just what that system happens to look like from the outside. XXXG-000 Wing Gundam Zero Head Unit. The Nightingale's head unit was monstrous by design, a deliberate rejection of humanoid proportion, but at least the Wing Gundam Zero's head exists in a category where monstrous actually serves a purpose, because the Zero wasn't just designed to be a mobile suit, it was designed to become a bird. And the head unit had to survive that transformation intact, which meant every sensor, every plate, every mounting point had to earn its place twice. Once in mobile suit mode, and again when the center of gravity shifted and the Zero defolded itself into Neo Bird mode. Developed by 5 scientists, the head unit carries the fingerprints of 5 different design philosophies fused into a single coherent system, which is either a triumph of collaborative engineering or a catalog of every compromise that collaboration required. The center sensor array serves as the primary visual system of the mobile suit, aggregating multiple sensor inputs into a single targeting package, which means the Zero's head unit isn't one head unit. It's 2, and the difference between them is structural, not cosmetic. The shield is constructed from Gundanium alloy, one of the few armor surfaces the head unit relies on for protection during high-impact engagement. The same shield must serve both offensive and defensive roles without compromising the head unit's sensor functions. That's the kind of multi-role engineering that sounds impressive until you work through the mechanical implications, and the mechanical implications are the whole point. The real stakes here are the sensors. Neobird mode demands that the Zero's primary visual system abandon its forward-facing position. The center sensor repositions itself to serve an aerodynamic nose cone, which means the mobile suit with the most dramatic speed advantage in its class spends its fastest configuration looking through a sensor that isn't where a sensor should be. The shield becomes a gun. The head becomes a nose cone. Everything serves the transformation at the cost of what a head unit is actually supposed to do. And before anyone reaches for the collaborative development explanation, 5 scientists, conflicting inputs, the inconsistencies are just the natural friction of multiple hands on the same design. Look at the timeline. AC-175, the Gundam Scientific Consortium, was coordinating those 5 researchers, which means the sensor repositioning wasn't an accident. It was a requirement baked into the Neobird mode concept that every team had to accommodate, whether they liked it or not. The Freedom Gundam would come later and prove that you didn't need to move anything at all. ZGMF X-10A Freedom Gundam Head Unit. Where the Wing Zero scattered its systems across every surface to serve a transformation, the Freedom locks everything into a single unmoving face and dares you to look away. It's the mecha that proved a V-fin doesn't need to move to be the most recognizable silhouette in the franchise, and its head unit wears its colors with a specificity that borders on forensic. The face sensors carry a deep yellow paint finish. The upper portion of the head is coated in Gundam red. The brow area is painted flat black. The helmet antennae are finished in Mr. Color Gundam Yellow, an actual commercial product, a real paint you can buy, referenced by name rather than described as yellow or gold. The Freedom's head unit is painted in distinct color zones that give it one of the most recognizable faces in the franchise. The Freedom exists in an era of mecha anime that was already overcrowded with red mobile suits, and its head unit had to earn its place in that crowd without the Wing Zero's transformation spectacle or the Nightingale's alien silhouette to fall back on. Every choice on that head was made to answer the question of what happens when a design has nowhere to hide and still has to be unforgettable. But here's the turn. The ordinary explanation for the Freedom's iconic status is that it's well designed, and that's not wrong, but it's also not the full picture. The real question is what it would take for those paint specifications to be accidental, and the answer is they can't be. If the distinct color zones of the face sensors, upper head, brow, and antennae were chosen without intent, you'd get a color scheme that was roughly correct but imprecise, shades that approximated the target without hitting it. That's what happens when design is approximate. What the Freedom has instead is a head unit where every named surface matches a named paint product with zero ambiguity, which is the signature of a design team working from a specific reference board, not 5 scientists improvising in a laboratory. The Freedom's head unit is too exact to be a coincidence, and that exactness is what makes the V-fin matter. When someone asks you what the Freedom Gundam's head unit looks like, the answer you'd repeat tomorrow is the V-fin. That single wing carved into the forehead, doing nothing functional and everything memorable at once. ZGMF X42S Destiny Gundam Head Unit. The Destiny makes a case that the Freedom's rule was never actually a rule. Its head unit arrives wearing angular wing head fins positioned in roughly the same territory where the Freedom placed its iconic V-fin, a color scheme and general silhouette that initially read like a deliberate continuation of the precedent. The fins cut at angles the Freedom never attempted, sharper and more directional than anything the V-fin suggested, and where the Freedom's wing implied elegance and forward motion. The Destiny's fins feel deliberately sharpened, designed for impact rather than suggestion. The Destiny departs from the Freedom's design language with sharper, more angular fins. The Freedom had appeared to establish a standard for what a protagonist's head unit should look like: V-fin, specific red, specific yellow, specific everything. The Destiny stepped into that template and broke it without breaking the category. There was no unwritten rule. The Freedom's V-fin looked like a rule because it was so consistent, so dominant, so widely copied that it seemed to carry structural weight, but the Destiny proved that weight was aesthetic, not functional. The Freedom's V-fin became the most recognizable head unit silhouette in the cosmic era. Shin Asuka received the Destiny as his definitive mobile suit in the Mobile Suit Gundam Seed Destiny anime. His one machine, his one visual identity, the head unit that would carry his face into every promotional frame and model box for the entire run of the series. That head unit was designed explicitly to push back against the precedent the Freedom had established. Kira Yamato moved from the Freedom to the Strike Freedom and kept going. Shin Asuka got the Destiny, which had already used its one statement to contradict someone else's.